I mean, looking at the status that we are today, so you would say that the summary of previous administration's objectives have been successful.
The scope of our ongoing audit,
70,000 people dying. That, as a former prescriber of these types of drugs, that does not look like a success to me.
the trends are continuing to increase.
So you'll agree with me, they've been a failure.
I can't say that it's been a failure.
So you would say that 70,000 people dying is a success?
I would say it's a crisis.
Thank you. So it's been a failure. Now, Director Carroll, I quite understand the complexity of this, being a former prescription person, very frugal at that, you know, because there's unintended consequences. So I'm from Western Arizona, and I have a population that is fairly old. They're dual eligible, so some of the consequences of counting pills actually backfire on us, you know, particularly with our veterans, particularly our infirmed, particularly those suffering from some pain applications. And so a lot of these folks are actually forced underground because of some of the previous measures where they can get some of these illicit drugs cheaper, right?
That's correct.
Now, I want to highlight what some of the problems are, because two of my friends from Texas kind of highlighted that, particularly with fentanyl, you don't get second chances, do you, with fentanyl?
Not only by the grace of God.
That's right. And so a lot of these overdoses, some of these people are actually taking something that is completely different. It could be a sleep drug, and it's laced, and they don't ever wake up. Is that true?
That's true. That's why there needs to be a really balanced approach to this.
Now, I want to get back to the HIDA situation. I want to get your take first.
Yes, sir.
So we always hear that 90% of all the drugs are caught at the border crossings.
Yes, sir.
Most of our Border Patrol are located where?
Along the borders?
At the border crossings.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And in most cases, like in Arizona, 40% of these illegal drugs are coming through this, I would say, aorta of drug trade. That's the numbers. 40% of all illegal drugs are coming through the Arizona portal. Now, we've got a number of Border Patrol agents that are covering vast amount of real estate. Is that true?
I've flown over in CBP helicopters. It's unbelievable how vast it is, and what we're asking the CBP to do with manpower alone.
Mr. McDaniel, would you agree with that? I know you're in the Texas-Houston area, but you've got to be familiar with Arizona.
Yes, sir, I am.
So vast areas, and what ends up happening, this type of trade is very interrelated. Human trafficking, because when you intentionally move human trafficking, it takes a lot of operational people to inventory them. True?
Yes, sir.
So as those limited resources of Border Patrol agents are managing and inventorying human assets, what happens with drugs?
They're both intertwined. They're flowing through with the same people, the same coyotes, and so when the Border Patrol is having to detain the persons, it could be potentially worse for the drugs to go unnoticed.
So the number that the public keeps hearing of 90% of all interdicted drugs are at our border crossings is a false premise, because what it basically does, we don't know what we don't know crossing in between those ports, right?
Those are the unknowns of what we're not catching.
But we get, Mr. Roy actually highlighted some of those. We're seeing some of these interdictions by luck and by haphazard in many cases, just because of the limited assets that are out there. So this is exponentially bigger than what we're comprehending. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
When you interdict these drugs, are they ounces, pounds? Can you give us a quantitative amount, how much there is?
Along the border crossings, they're large quantities, because obviously the cartels are not going to waste time moving small amounts. And the only small amounts that we're getting off defendants that are being apprehended are personal use stuff that they have on their possession. Last
thing, just as a statement, the President's emergency order covered the top 10 things in regards to what Border Patrol enumerated as our top 10 protocols. Is that true?
I'm not familiar with that, sir.
Director Carroll, would you agree?
I know they enumerated specific priorities in terms of ranking them about how to stop the flow of drugs coming across.
I thank the gentleman. I yield back.